Opening chapter: The habit of force. Forcing is a learned habit. When movement slows, pressure is applied. When outcomes are delayed, effort increases. When clarity does not appear, control is attempted. This pattern feels responsible. It feels active, it feels necessary, it is rarely questioned. Modern culture reinforces it. Strain is praised as commitment. Urgency is mistaken for seriousness. Resistance is interpreted as proof that something important is happening. Yet the results follow a different logic. What is forced tends to destabilize. What is rushed rarely settles. What is imposed often requires correction. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that life does not respond to insistence. Natural processes unfold without pressure. Completion follows rhythm, not demand. Nothing essential improves through haste. Where force appears, friction follows. This friction is not opposition. It is an adjustment. Life does not resist arbitrarily. It resists what exceeds its timing. A branch breaks when bent too quickly. A field depletes when pushed beyond recovery. A body collapses when effort ignores rhythm. The same pattern governs decisions, work, and human affairs. Action taken too early produces complications. Decisions made under pressure require revision. Effort applied without clarity multiplies problems. Forcing always increases complexity. What could have resolved quietly now demands management. What could have unfolded naturally now requires intervention. This is the hidden cost. More energy is spent repairing than progressing. More control is applied to compensate for the loss of direction. More urgency accumulates where restraint was absent. This is not a failure. It is misalignment. Life restores balance automatically. Force disrupts it. The consequences do not appear immediately. They surface later, disguised as fatigue, instability, or decline. Alignment leaves fewer traces. Things complete themselves. Effort decreases. Movement becomes efficient. Nothing announces this shift. There is no visible struggle to admire, only the absence of resistance. Nature offers no example of progress achieved through strain. Water reshapes stone without conflict. Growth occurs without insistence. Cycles complete without effort. Life leaves nothing unfinished, and it never hurries. Forcing is the refusal to recognize this order. When interference ceases, structure reappears. And what follows does not feel dramatic. It feels inevitable. Chapter 2. Order exists before effort. Before action appears, there is order. This order was not created by intention. It is not negotiated by will. It exists independently of preference, urgency, or belief. Life moves according to structure, long before human thought attempts to intervene. What unfolds does so within limits. What grows does so according to measure. What endures does so because it fits within the conditions that sustain it. Effort enters later. This sequence is often reversed in human affairs. Action is taken before understanding. Pressure is applied before orientation. Movement begins before direction is established. The result is friction. Not because action is wrong, but because it is premature. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that life functions according to an underlying order that does not respond to domination. He did not present this as doctrine, but as observation. Nature does not improvise, it adjusts. Adjustment is not hesitation, it is intelligence responding to conditions. A river does not choose its path randomly. It follows the lowest resistance permitted by terrain. When conditions change, the path changes. No argument is involved. This responsiveness is often mistaken for passivity. In truth, it is precision. Order is not rigid, it is coherence. Rigid systems fracture when conditions shift. Coherent systems adapt without breaking. Human effort often fails because it attempts to impose rigidity where flexibility is required. Plans are forced despite changing circumstances. Decisions are defended despite new information. Direction is maintained even when feedback indicates misalignment. This persistence is praised as determination. Yet determination without coherence produces waste. Energy is expended resisting signals instead of interpreting them. Resources are consumed maintaining direction instead of correcting it. Effort multiplies where adjustment would have sufficed. Order precedes efficiency. Efficiency is not speed, it is fit. When effort aligns with structure, movement appears effortless. When effort conflicts with structure, movement becomes laborious. This distinction is subtle but decisive. A tool functions well when used according to its design. Misuse requires force. The same applies to action. When circumstances are understood, action requires minimal exertion. When circumstances are misunderstood, effort compensates for ignorance. Compensation is costly. It produces short-term motion and long-term instability. Most breakdowns do not occur from lack of effort. They occur from effort applied in the wrong direction at the wrong time, or under false assumptions. Order reveals timing. Timing cannot be calculated through urgency. It is perceived through attention. Attention diminishes under pressure. Pressure narrows perception. Narrow perception misses context. Missed context produces an error. This is why force fails repeatedly in complex situations. Complexity requires sensitivity. Sensitivity requires calm. Calm does not mean inaction. It means the absence of distortion. Distortion arises when outcome precedes understanding. When results are demanded, signals are ignored. When speed is prioritized, feedback is dismissed. When control dominates, learning ceases. Order is replaced by insistence. Life responds to insistence by resisting it. This resistance is not adversarial. It is corrective. Systems self-correct when an imbalance appears. Excess is countered. Rigidity is stressed until it yields. This principle operates universally. Bodies collapse when pushed beyond rhythm. Organizations fragment when expansion ignores structure. Decisions unravel when urgency overrides clarity. In each case, force accelerates decline. An order would have prevented it. The absence of visible progress often signals that order has not yet been recognized. Waiting is then required. Waiting is frequently misinterpreted as stagnation. In reality, waiting preserves resources until conditions clarify. Premature action creates momentum without direction. Such momentum is difficult to reverse. Correction becomes expensive. Order minimizes correction. This is why restraint often appears wiser in hindsight. What seemed inactive was in fact preservative. What seemed slow was precise. When the order is acknowledged, action becomes obvious. There is little deliberation, little internal conflict. Movement occurs naturally because resistance is minimal. This is not intuition, it is aligned with conditions as they are. Effort applied at the right moment achieves more with less. Effort applied outside that moment multiplies itself without resolution. This difference determines outcomes more than talent, intelligence, or ambition. Order governs before effort appears. Ignoring it does not eliminate it. It only increases cost. Recognition simplifies action. Force complicates it. Where order is respected, stability emerges. Where order is denied, instability follows. Life does not require domination to function. It requires cooperation with what already exists. When action aligns with structure, nothing is wasted. When action violates it, nothing is spared. This is not philosophy. It is a sequence. Order first, action second. Reversing this sequence produces friction. Following it produces continuity. And continuity, once established, requires no force to maintain. Chapter 3. Force and Resistance. Force never appears alone. Where force is applied, resistance emerges, not as opposition, but as a response. This relationship is consistent. It does not vary with intention. It does not soften for good motives. Resistance is not hostile. It is stabilizing. Life does not resist action. It resists excess. Excess arises when effort ignores conditions, when direction is chosen without context, when outcomes are pursued without regard for timing. Force attempts to override these limits. Resistance restores them. This dynamic is often misunderstood. Resistance is interpreted as obstruction, as misfortune, as evidence that greater effort is required, so more force is applied. The cycle intensifies. Pressure increases. Movement slows. Complexity grows. Eventually, exhaustion follows. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that what is forced inevitably provokes its opposite. He did not frame this as a warning. He described it as a pattern. Nature demonstrates this without exception. A structure rigid beyond its tolerance fractures. A system pushed past balance destabilizes. A body strained beyond rhythm collapses. Resistance does not cause these outcomes. It reveals the point at which force exceeded coherence. Human effort frequently crosses this threshold unnoticed because force produces immediate sensation. Resistance often appears delayed. The action feels productive at first. Momentum builds. Activity increases. But stability erodes quietly. Small corrections become necessary. Secondary actions accumulate. Maintenance replaces progress. What began as forward movement turns into management. This shift is subtle. Force feels decisive. Resistance feels inconvenient. So force is justified. Resistance is ignored until the cost becomes visible. When resistance is finally acknowledged, it is often too late to reverse without loss. This is why force appears effective in the short term and destructive in the long term. Resistance always has the longer horizon. It operates beyond immediacy. It restores balance over time. This is not a moral consequence. It is a structural adjustment. Force compresses reality. Resistance expands it back to proportion. The greater the compression, the greater the rebound. This principle governs not only physical systems, but decisions, institutions, and lives. When growth is forced, instability follows. When expansion ignores structure, collapse becomes likely. When effort substitutes for understanding, results degrade. Resistance is the signal that understanding has been bypassed. It indicates a misfit. Force assumes that effort can replace alignment. Resistance disproves this assumption. Alignment reduces resistance automatically. Force multiplies it. This is why sustained force becomes self-defeating. Each action requires more energy than the last. Each correction consumes resources. Each attempt to stabilize demands additional control. Eventually, effort is spent maintaining position rather than advancing. Stagnation masquerades as activity. At this stage, resistance is often personalized. External factors are blamed, circumstances are accused, opposition is imagined. But resistance is not external. It is embedded in the action itself. It arises from violating conditions, not from interference. This distinction is critical. Life does not oppose direction, it opposes imbalance. Imbalance can persist temporarily, but it cannot endure. Resistance accumulates until correction occurs. Correction may arrive gently or abruptly. The difference depends on how long the force was sustained. Early recognition allows adjustment. Delayed recognition demands consequence. This is why restraint is efficient. Restraint notices resistance early. Force ignores it. Restraint adapts. Force insists. One conserves energy, the other consumes it. Force treats resistance as an obstacle. Restraint treats it as information. Information refines action. Obstacles provoke escalation. Escalation rarely resolves complexity. It amplifies it. This is why simple problems become complicated under force, and complicated problems become unmanageable. Resistance is not an enemy. It is feedback. When feedback is dismissed, systems degrade. Force cannot eliminate resistance. It can only increase it. Resistance ceases only when force ceases. This is not surrender. It is recalibration. When effort aligns with conditions, resistance dissolves without confrontation. No victory is required. No struggle occurs. Movement resumes naturally. This absence of conflict is often misread as weakness, but nothing stable is achieved through conflict with reality. Reality always outlasts insistence. Force is temporary. Resistance is patient. In time, resistance prevails, not by attack, by endurance. This is why force exhausts itself. It must be renewed constantly. Resistance only needs to wait. When force withdraws, resistance disappears. Balance restores itself. This restoration is quiet. There is no announcement, no lesson delivered. Only continuity. Force and resistance are inseparable. One summons the other. Understanding this relationship changes action, not by adding effort, by removing excess. Where force ends, resistance has no function, and where resistance fades, movement becomes efficient again. Chapter 4: The Illusion of Control. Control appears wherever uncertainty is felt. When outcomes are unclear, structure is imposed. When variables multiply, oversight increases. When stability is threatened, authority tightens. This response feels rational, it feels preventative, it feels necessary. Control promises safety, yet safety rarely follows. What control provides is the appearance of stability, not stability itself. It produces order on the surface while tension accumulates beneath. This tension is often invisible at first, processes continue, decisions are executed, progress appears measurable. But flexibility diminishes, adjustment becomes difficult, feedback is delayed, correction is resisted. Control substitutes certainty for understanding. This substitution is costly. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that the impulse to dominate arises when trust in natural order weakens. Where confidence in the process fades, control rushes in to compensate. Control does not emerge from strength, it emerges from fear of disorder. Fear narrows perception. Narrow perception seeks simplification. Simplification hardens into rigidity. Rigid systems do not adapt well. They rely on enforcement rather than responsiveness. They require constant maintenance. They deteriorate under change. Control fixes position. Life remains dynamic. This mismatch creates strain. When control increases, movement slows. When movement slows, more control is applied. The cycle intensifies. What begins as guidance becomes constraint. Constraint is defended as a discipline. Discipline is defended as responsibility. Yet the underlying instability grows. Control demands constant attention. It cannot be relaxed without anxiety. The moment oversight weakens, tension surfaces. This reveals the fragility of the structure. A system that collapses when control is removed was never stable, it was merely restrained. True stability does not require supervision, it arises from coherence. Coherence allows components to function independently while remaining aligned. Control suppresses independence to preserve appearance. Appearance deceives. Order achieved through control is brittle. Order achieved through alignment is resilient. The difference becomes visible under pressure. When conditions shift, controlled systems resist change. They preserve form even as function degrades. Adaptation is delayed. Signals are ignored. The correction arrives late. This delay multiplies consequences. The illusion of control persists because it offers immediate reassurance. Effort feels productive. Authority feels effective. Decisions feel decisive. But reassurance is not resolution. Control reduces anxiety temporarily. It does not reduce complexity. Complexity remains unresolved until understanding replaces enforcement. Understanding cannot be forced. This principle need not be grand. It must be consistent. Consistency aligns effort across time. Time amplifies consistency. This amplification produces visible results. Inner order operates quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It manifests through ease of execution. Tasks require less deliberation. Decisions require less justification. Movement feels unforced. This ease is often misunderstood. It is attributed to talent, or circumstance, or advantage. In reality, it is alignment maintained over time. Outer results then appear inevitable. When inner order is absent, outcomes fluctuate. Success alternates with setback. Progress is followed by regression. These oscillations are attributed to external volatility, but volatility persists only where coherence is lacking. Inner order stabilizes response. Stability in response produces stability in results. This does not eliminate the challenge. It eliminates confusion. Confusion is costly. It consumes attention. It drains energy. It multiplies effort. Order conserves. Conservation allows endurance. Endurance outlasts intensity. Intensity burns quickly. Endurance compounds slowly. This difference determines the long-term outcome. Inner order also governs restraint. When priorities are clear, unnecessary action is avoided. When orientation is stable, temptation loses influence. Restraint preserves resources. Resources accumulate. Accumulation strengthens position. Strength then reduces the need for force. Force becomes unnecessary when position is secure. Security is not produced by aggression. It is produced by coherence maintained over time. This principle applies universally. In work, scattered intention produces scattered output. In systems, conflicting goals produce inefficiency. In decisions, unresolved values produce hesitation. Each case reflects the same structure. Outer results reflect inner arrangement. Attempts to reverse this relationship fail. Results cannot organize their cause, they only reveal it. This revelation is often uncomfortable. It removes external explanations. It shifts attention inward. Inner order cannot be borrowed. It cannot be delegated. It cannot be simulated. It must be established. Once established, it requires maintenance. Maintenance is subtle. It consists of regular alignment, of removing contradiction when it appears, of refusing to act when coherence is absent. This refusal is often mistaken for weakness. It is not. It is discipline directed inward. Inner discipline precedes outer effectiveness. Without it, effort scatters. With it, effort concentrates. Concentration amplifies impact. Impact accumulates results. Results then appear consistent. Consistency builds trust. Trust reduces resistance. Resistance dissolves. Movement becomes efficient. This efficiency is not accidental. It is a consequence. Inner order does not guarantee success. It guarantees stability of direction. Stability of direction outlasts fluctuation. Over time, it prevails. Outer results follow inner order. They cannot do otherwise. When the inner arrangement is coherent, the outer expression reflects it. When it is not, no amount of effort corrects the imbalance. The sequence remains fixed. Inner first, outer second. Ignoring this sequence delays the outcome. Respecting it simplifies action. And simplification, once achieved, sustains itself without force. Chapter 5. Timing and Premature Action. Action fails most often not because it is wrong, but because it is early. Timing governs effectiveness more than effort. When timing is correct, little force is required. When timing is ignored, even great effort produces weak results. This principle is widely acknowledged in retrospect and routinely dismissed in practice. Urgency interferes with perception. The desire to resolve replaces the need to observe. Movement begins before conditions settle. Premature action feels decisive. It creates the impression of control. It reduces discomfort by replacing uncertainty with activity. Yet the relief is temporary. Action taken before timing introduces instability. It produces consequences that require further action. What was meant to resolve a situation extends it. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that forcing events before their season leads to loss rather than gain. He described timing not as strategy, but as alignment with conditions. Conditions mature gradually. Signals accumulate. Patterns clarify. Constraints reveal themselves. Premature action interrupts this process. By acting too early, information is discarded. Feedback is prevented. Correction becomes expensive. The cost is rarely immediate. At first, momentum appears. Steps are taken, decisions are executed, progress seems visible. But the foundation is incomplete. Small errors pass unnoticed. Assumptions remain untested. Dependencies are overlooked. These omissions surface later. What could have been adjusted easily now demands rework. What could have been delayed briefly now requires reversal. What could have unfolded naturally now resists direction. Premature action converts uncertainty into commitment. Commitment hardens choices. Hardened choices resist revision. As conditions continue to evolve, the gap between action and reality widens. This gap produces friction. Effort increases to compensate. Control intensifies to preserve direction. Flexibility decreases to protect decisions already made. The system becomes fragile. Timing would have prevented this fragility. Waiting is often mischaracterized as indecision. In reality, it is discernment. Discernment preserves optionality. It allows alignment to emerge. Premature action collapses options prematurely. Once action is taken, alternatives narrow. Reversibility diminishes. Learning slows. The earlier the action, the higher the cost of correction. Timing reduces this cost. When action aligns with the maturity of conditions, movement appears smooth. Resistance is minimal. Completion follows without excess effort. This efficiency is mistaken for luck. It is not. It is sequence respected. The difficulty lies in recognizing readiness. Readiness does not announce itself loudly. It appears quietly, through consistency of signals, repeated patterns, stabilized variables, reduced volatility. When these appear, action becomes obvious. There is little urgency, little doubt, little internal conflict. Premature action is accompanied by tension. Debate persists. Justification is repeated. Certainty is asserted rather than felt. These are indicators of misalignment. They are often ignored because delay feels risky. But risk does not increase with waiting, it increases with blindness. Blindness follows haste. Haste compresses perception. Compressed perception misreads context. Timing expands perception. It allows distinction between what is essential and what is incidental. This distinction determines success. Many failures attributed to poor execution originate in poor timing. Execution amplifies conditions. It does not correct them. If conditions are immature, execution magnifies error. If conditions are mature, execution accelerates the outcome. The same action can succeed or fail depending on timing alone. This is why repetition without awareness produces inconsistent results. The action remains constant. Conditions change. Timing accounts for this change. Ignoring timing treats reality as static. Reality is not static. It evolves continuously. Effective action moves with this evolution. Premature action attempts to freeze it. Freezing produces resistance. Resistance demands force. Force creates exhaustion. Exhaustion is then misattributed to lack of discipline rather than lack of patience. Patience is misunderstood. It is not waiting without intention, it is waiting with attention. Attention gathers information, information clarifies direction. Direction reduces effort. This sequence cannot be rushed. Attempts to rush it produce distortion. Distortion requires correction. Correction consumes resources. Timing conserves them. This is why restraint often appears wiser after consequences unfold. What seemed slow proved accurate. What seemed decisive proved costly. Timing reveals itself only to those willing to endure uncertainty briefly. Those unwilling act prematurely. Those unwilling then manage consequences longer. Time saved at the beginning is paid later with interest. This interest compounds. Premature action is expensive. Timing is economical. The difference between them is not visible in the moment, it becomes evident over time. Life does not reward speed, it rewards fit. Fit emerges when action meets readiness. Readiness cannot be forced, it can only be recognized. When recognition replaces urgency, action aligns naturally. And when action aligns, resistance diminishes. Not because force was applied, but because timing was respected. Chapter 6. Inner Order and Outer Results. Outer results do not arise independently. They emerge from internal arrangements long before they become visible. This sequence is often overlooked. Attention is placed on outcomes, methods are refined, effort is adjusted. Yet the underlying structure remains unchanged. When results fail to stabilize, more effort is applied. When inconsistency appears, control increases. The cause is misidentified. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that harmony in action depends on harmony within. He described order as something established before movement, not corrected afterward. Inner order is not emotional calm, it is structural coherence. It exists when thought, intention and action are aligned. Where this alignment is absent, contradiction appears. Contradiction generates friction. Friction distorts judgment. Distorted judgment produces inconsistent action. Inconsistent action yields unstable results. This chain is reliable. Inner disorder rarely announces itself loudly. It manifests subtly through hesitation, through overcorrection, through the need to justify decisions repeatedly. These signals are often ignored. They are treated as normal features of complexity. In reality, they indicate misalignment. When inner structure is fragmented, action becomes reactive. Reaction replaces response. Speed replaces clarity. This substitution increases activity while reducing effectiveness. Outer instability mirrors inner fragmentation. Plans shift frequently, priorities compete, direction blurs, effort increases to compensate, but compensation cannot replace coherence. Coherence simplifies. When inner order is present, fewer decisions are required. Action follows naturally from clarity. Contradictions resolve themselves. This resolution reduces effort. Outer results stabilize as a consequence. Stability is often mistaken for stagnation. It is not. It is continuity. Continuity allows accumulation. Accumulation compounds. Results. Disorder prevents accumulation. When inner priorities conflict, effort disperses. Energy fragments, progress stalls. Outer results appear erratic. Attempts are made to correct externally. Systems are adjusted. Strategies are revised. Structures are redesigned. Yet the instability persists because the source remains untouched. Inner order cannot be imposed externally. It arises from clarity of orientation. Orientation answers a simple question: what governs action? When multiple drivers compete, action oscillates. When a single principle governs, action consolidates. This principle need not be grand. It must be consistent. Consistency aligns effort across time. Time amplifies consistency. This amplification produces visible results. Inner order operates quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It manifests through ease of execution. Tasks require less deliberation. Decisions require less justification. Movement feels unforced. This ease is often misunderstood. It is attributed to talent, or circumstance, or advantage. In reality, it is alignment maintained over time. Outer results then appear inevitable. When inner order is absent, outcomes fluctuate. Success alternates with setback. Progress is followed by regression. These oscillations are attributed to external volatility, but volatility persists only where coherence is lacking. Inner order stabilizes response. Stability in response produces stability in results. This does not eliminate the challenge. It eliminates confusion. Confusion is costly. It consumes attention. It drains energy. It multiplies effort. Order conserves. Conservation allows endurance. Endurance outlasts intensity. Intensity burns quickly. Endurance compounds slowly. This difference determines the long-term outcome. Inner order also governs restraint. When priorities are clear, unnecessary action is avoided. When orientation is stable, temptation loses influence. Restraint preserves resources. Resources accumulate. Accumulation strengthens position. Strength then reduces the need for force. Force becomes unnecessary when position is secure. Security is not produced by aggression. It is produced by coherence maintained over time. This principle applies universally. In work, scattered intention produces scattered output. In systems, conflicting goals produce inefficiency. In decisions, unresolved values produce hesitation. Each case reflects the same structure. Outer results reflect inner arrangement. Attempts to reverse this relationship fail. Results cannot organize their cause, they only reveal it. This revelation is often uncomfortable. It removes external explanations. It shifts attention inward. Inner order cannot be borrowed. It cannot be delegated. It cannot be simulated. It must be established. Once established, it requires maintenance. Maintenance is subtle. It consists of regular alignment, of removing contradiction when it appears, of refusing to act when coherence is absent. This refusal is often mistaken for weakness. It is not. It is discipline directed inward. Inner discipline precedes outer effectiveness. Without it, effort scatters. With it, effort concentrates. Concentration amplifies impact. Impact accumulates results. Results then appear consistent. Consistency builds trust. Trust reduces resistance. Resistance dissolves. Movement becomes efficient. This efficiency is not accidental. It is a consequence. Inner order does not guarantee success. It guarantees stability of direction. Stability of direction outlasts fluctuation. Over time, it prevails. Outer results follow inner order. They cannot do otherwise. When the inner arrangement is coherent, the outer expression reflects it. When it is not, no amount of effort corrects the imbalance. The sequence remains fixed. Inner first, outer second. Ignoring this sequence delays the outcome. Respecting it simplifies action. And simplification, once achieved, sustains itself without force. Chapter 7. Yielding and Real Strength. Strength is commonly misunderstood. It is associated with force, assertion, and resistance. It is measured by the ability to impose will and maintain position under pressure. This definition is incomplete. What resists rigidly breaks first. What yields appropriately endures. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that what appears soft often survives what appears strong. He did not praise weakness. He described durability. Yielding is not collapsing. It is responsiveness. It adjusts without losing continuity. It bends without abandoning direction. Force holds shape at the expense of function. Yielding preserves function even as shape changes. This distinction determines longevity. Rigid strength depends on constant reinforcement. It must be defended, maintained, and protected. Yielding strength relies on fit. It remains effective because it adapts to conditions rather than opposing them. Opposition consumes energy. Adaptation conserves it. This conversation accumulates an advantage over time. Yielding strength does not announce itself. It does not confront. It does not dominate. It does not demand recognition. It moves around obstacles rather than through them. It absorbs impact rather than returning it. This behavior is often mistaken for concession. In reality, it is strategic patience. Where force escalates conflict, yielding dissolves it. Where resistance intensifies pressure, yielding redistributes it. Pressure cannot sustain itself without opposition. When opposition disappears, pressure collapses. This is not surrender. It is a refusal to participate in an imbalance. Real strength does not require friction to prove itself. It functions without resistance. This makes it difficult to observe. Spectacle favors force. Endurance favors yield. Short-term dominance is visible. Long-term stability is quiet. Yielding allows time to work. Time favors what does not exhaust itself. What strains must recover. What yields continues. This continuity compounds. Force achieves immediate displacement. Yielding achieves a permanent position. The difference emerges over duration. Yielding strength does not react impulsively. It absorbs information before responding. This absorption refines action. Refined action requires less effort. Less effort produces less disturbance. Less disturbance reduces resistance. Resistance diminishes. Movement becomes efficient. Efficiency appears effortless. Effortlessness is often misinterpreted as a lack of strength. This error is common. Strength is assumed to be visible, but visibility correlates with exertion, not durability. What endures rarely draws attention. Yielding strength does not harden prematurely. It allows form to emerge gradually. Premature hardening produces brittleness. Brittle fractures under variation. Yielding accommodates variation. Variation is constant. Systems that cannot accommodate variation fail. Yielding strength anticipates change. Force resists it. Resistance delays adaptation. Delay increases cost. Yielding minimizes cost by adjusting early. This early adjustment prevents escalation. Escalation magnifies consequences. Avoiding escalation preserves stability. Yielding is therefore preventative, not reactive. It prevents breakdown by remaining flexible. Flexibility is not indecision, it is ready to reconfigure. This readiness allows continuity despite disruption. Disruption is inevitable. Collapse is not. Collapse occurs when rigidity meets change. Yielding prevents this meeting. It redirects force instead of absorbing it directly. This redirection is efficient. It requires less reinforcement. Reinforcement drains resources. Yielding conserves them. Conservation strengthens its position gradually. Gradual strengthening outlasts abrupt assertion. Abrupt assertion invites counterforce. Counterforce escalates conflict. Conflict consumes both sides. Yielding withdraws from this exchange. Refusing escalation, it deprives the conflict of fuel. Without fuel, conflict subsides. Strength remains intact. This strength is not aggressive, it is stable. Stability does not seek dominance, it maintains presence. Presence is sufficient. Yielding strength occupies space without tension. It does not need to defend its position constantly. Its position is supported by coherence. Coherence is difficult to displace. Force displaces temporarily. Coherence resists displacement inherently. This is why yielding strength appears inevitable. It does not advance dramatically. It remains. Remaining outlasts pushing. Pushing requires renewal. Remaining does not. Time amplifies the difference. Over time, force fatigues. Yielding persists. Persistence accumulates influence. Influence reduces the need for force. Eventually, force becomes unnecessary. Yielding strength prevails. Not by victory, but by continuity. It is still present when opposition exhausts itself. This presence is quiet. No struggle announces it. No conquest defines it. Only endurance. Strength, when understood correctly, is not the ability to resist. It is the ability to remain functional under change. Yielding provides this ability. Force undermines it. This distinction is decisive. What yields appropriately remains. What resists excessively breaks. This pattern repeats without exception. Yielding is therefore not weakness. It is the highest form of strength available to systems that must endure. Chapter 8: Simplicity and Non-Interference. Complexity is rarely inherent. It accumulates. Each addition responds to a previous disturbance. Each rule compensates for an earlier imbalance. Each intervention attempts to correct the effect of a prior intervention. Over time, layers form. What was once clear becomes dense. What was once direct becomes mediated. What was once functional becomes difficult to maintain. This accumulation is mistaken for progress. In reality, it is residue. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that interference multiplies disorder rather than resolving it. He did not argue for the absence of action but for restraint in the face of unnecessary correction. Simplicity is not minimalism by preference. It is efficiency achieved through removal. What is unnecessary is eliminated. What does not contribute is discarded. What interferes with flow is withdrawn. This removal restores clarity. Clarity reduces effort. Effort decreases not because less is done, but because less is undone afterward. Interference creates work for itself. An action taken prematurely requires monitoring. A rule imposed hastily demands enforcement. A correction applied without understanding generates side effects. These side effects invite further intervention. The cycle repeats. Complexity grows. Eventually, maintenance exceeds creation. Energy is spent preserving structure rather than producing value. Non-interference interrupts this cycle. It allows processes to reveal their own tendencies. It permits adjustment to occur organically. This does not eliminate oversight. It delays intervention until the necessity is clear. Necessity is often confused with discomfort. Discomfort invites immediate response, but discomfort is not always dysfunction. Many processes appear unstable before they settle. Premature correction prevents stabilization. Non-interference allows stabilization to complete. Simplicity emerges naturally when disturbance is reduced. This emergence is gradual. Excess elements fall away. Redundant actions cease. Unnecessary controls dissolve. The system becomes lighter. Lightness increases responsiveness. Responsive systems adapt without strain. They do not require constant direction. Direction arises from conditions. Conditions clarify when the interference subsides. This clarity is lost under constant manipulation. Manipulation distorts signals. Distorted signals mislead action. Action based on misinterpretation compounds the error. Simplicity prevents this compounding. By reducing intervention, signal-to-noise improves. Signals become distinguishable. Patterns become visible. Visibility enables alignment. Alignment reduces effort. This sequence is consistent. Interference disrupts it at the beginning. Correction attempts disrupt it further. Non-interference restores it. This restoration is often mistaken for neglect. Neglect abandons responsibility. Non-interference preserves it. Responsibility does not require constant action. It requires appropriate action. Appropriateness depends on timing and scale. Intervention applied at the wrong scale overwhelms the system. Intervention applied at the wrong time destabilizes it. Non-interference respects both. It waits until the scale is evident. It waits until timing is revealed. When intervention finally occurs, it is minimal. Minimal intervention has maximal effect. Because it addresses the cause rather than the symptom, symptoms proliferate under interference. Causes remain hidden. Simplicity exposes the cause by removing distractions. Distraction arises from excess structure. Structure accumulates when trust in natural adjustment diminishes. Fear of disorder motivates control. Control introduces complexity. Complexity obscures order. The cycle sustains itself. Breaking it requires restraint. Restraint allows systems to express their inherent tendencies. These tendencies are not chaotic. They follow internal logic. Logic emerges when pressure recedes. Non-interference creates space for this emergence. Space is often undervalued. It appears empty. It appears inactive. Yet space allows movement. Crowded systems stagnate. Open systems adapt. Simplicity creates space. Space absorbs fluctuation. It buffers variation. It prevents shock. Systems without space fracture under change. Non-interference preserves space by avoiding unnecessary occupation. This preservation enhances resilience. Resilience does not require reinforcement. It requires a margin. Margin is consumed by excess action. Each unnecessary intervention reduces the margin. Eventually, the margin disappears. At that point, even small disturbances cause failure. Simplicity protects margin. It limits action to what is essential. Essential action sustains function. Excess action undermines it. Determining what is essential requires observation. Observation requires patience. Patience is incompatible with constant interference. Non-interference creates the conditions for observation. Observation clarifies the necessity. Necessity guides action. Action guided by necessity is effective. Action guided by anxiety is excessive. Excess breeds complexity. Complexity invites further interference. The cycle continues. Simplicity ends the cycle, not by effort, by subtraction. What remains after subtraction is sufficient. Sufficient does not mean sparse, it means complete. Completeness requires nothing added. Non-interference protects completeness by refusing to disturb it. When disturbance ceases, structure stabilizes. Stability reduces the need for oversight. Oversight relaxes. Energy returns to creation. Creation proceeds without obstruction. This is not efficiency engineered. It is efficiency uncovered. Simplicity is not achieved. It is revealed. It appears when the interference stops, and once revealed, it sustains itself. Chapter 9. Letting outcomes complete themselves. Completion is often interrupted, not because the action was incorrect, but because the interference returned too soon. Outcomes require space to settle. Processes need time to integrate. Results mature after the action has ceased. This phase is frequently ignored. Once movement begins, supervision intensifies. Adjustments are introduced prematurely. Corrections are applied before consequences stabilize. The original action is no longer allowed to finish. Centuries ago, Laozi observed that those who interfere at the final stage lose what was nearly complete. He noted that damage often occurs not at the beginning, but at the end. This observation remains accurate. Completion has its own rhythm. It cannot be rushed without distortion. When action ends, integration begins. Integration aligns consequences. It resolves secondary effects. It distributes impact across the system. Interference during integration fragments the outcome. Small adjustments disrupt balance. Minor corrections introduce new variables. What was settling is unsettled again. The impulse to intervene arises from impatience. Silence feels unproductive. Stillness feels risky. Waiting appears passive. So activity resumes. The process is reopened. Each reopening delays closure. Closure is postponed indefinitely. This postponement is costly. Energy remains tied to what should have concluded. Attention remains occupied. Resources remain allocated. New movement is constrained by unfinished residue. Letting outcomes complete themselves releases these constraints. Completion frees capacity. Capacity enables continuity. Interference consumes capacity. This consumption is subtle. Effort feels small. Adjustment feels harmless. But accumulation occurs. Each unnecessary touch leaves a trace. Each refinement alters balance. Eventually, the original coherence is lost. The outcome becomes fragile. Fragility invites further intervention. The cycle continues. Completion requires restraint. Restraint is not abandonment. It is trust in process. Trust does not assume perfection. It accepts sufficiency. Sufficiency allows closure. Closure stabilizes results. Stabilized results require less maintenance. Maintenance is minimized when integration is respected. Integration is interrupted when supervision persists. Supervision substitutes presence for understanding. Understanding knows when to withdraw. Withdrawal allows consequences to align. Alignment completes the outcome. Many failures attributed to poor execution originate in premature correction. Execution initiates movement, correction reopens it. Reopening prevents consolidation. Consolidation produces durability. Durability outlasts refinement. Refinement pursued endlessly undermines durability. This pattern appears across domains. In systems, constant optimization destabilizes core function. In decisions, repeated revision erodes confidence. In processes, perpetual adjustment prevents completion. Completion is replaced by management. Management extends involvement indefinitely. Involvement without necessity drains attention. Attention is finite. Finite attention must be released. To move forward, completion enables release. Release enables renewal. Without release, renewal stagnates. Letting outcomes complete themselves restores this sequence. Action occurs. Action ends. Integration follows. Only after integration does evaluation become meaningful. Evaluation during integration distorts judgment. Results appear unstable when they are still forming. Judgment applied too early misclassifies the process as a failure. This misclassification triggers intervention. Intervention disrupts formation. The appearance of failure becomes real. This outcome is self-created. Patience would have prevented it. Patience is not waiting without awareness. It is allowing the process to express its consequence fully. Full expression reveals whether correction is required. Often, it is not. Often, what seemed flawed resolves itself. Given time, secondary effects neutralize. Imbalances correct naturally. Tension dissipates. Interference prevents this correction. It freezes the imbalance in place. Completion requires tolerance for temporary imperfection. Temporary imperfection is part of formation. Permanent imperfection arises from interruption. Letting go at the right moment preserves the outcome. Holding on beyond necessity degrades it. This distinction is subtle. It is learned through observation. Observation notices when action has fulfilled its role. Beyond that point, presence becomes intrusion. Intrusion alters outcome. Letting go preserves it. Completion is quiet. There is no signal, no confirmation, no announcement, only the absence of further requirements. This absence is often uncomfortable. It removes justification for involvement. It removes the sense of control. Yet control at this stage is an illusion. The process no longer belongs to the initiator. It belongs to the system. Systems are complete according to internal logic. External interference disturbs that logic. Non-interference restores it. Completion is then allowed. Once complete, outcomes stabilize. Stability reduces vigilance. Reduced vigilance frees attention. Attention redirects to a new creation. Creation proceeds without burden. This cycle sustains itself. Action followed by release. Release followed by integration. Integration followed by closure. Skipping the release prevents closure. Skipping closure prevents renewal. The cost accumulates. Letting outcomes complete themselves is therefore not passive. It is the precise timing of withdrawal. Withdrawal at the right moment preserves value. Withdrawal too early abandons the process. Withdrawal too late corrupts it. The right moment appears when further action no longer adds coherence. Beyond that point, restraint is required. Restraint maintains integrity. Integrity sustains results. Sustained results require no defense. They endure. This endurance is the final measure of effectiveness, not intensity, not visibility, not effort. completion. And completion arrives only when interference ends. Final chapter, when nothing is forced. What remains after force withdraws is often mistaken for emptiness. In reality, it is a structure revealed. When pressure subsides, signals reappear. When urgency dissolves, rhythm becomes perceptible. When interference ends, continuity resumes. This sequence closes what force disrupted. The withdrawal of force does not halt movement. It clarifies it. Movement no longer competes with itself. Effort no longer fragments direction. Action aligns with the condition. The system settles. Centuries ago, Laozi described this settling as the natural state of things when insistence ceases. He did not present it as an achievement. He observed it as a return. Return does not imply regression. It implies restoration of proportion. Excess recedes. Deficiency corrects itself. Balance reasserts without command. This reassertion is quiet. No struggle announces it. No resolution is declared. What changes is efficiency. Effort decreases without loss of momentum. Movement continues without strain. Outcomes stabilize without enforcement. The cost of maintenance declines. Maintenance had replaced progress. Now, progress resumes. This transition does not occur dramatically. It arrives gradually. As accumulated tension dissipates, the system breathes again. Where force once compensated for misalignment, alignment now carries function. This alignment does not depend on vigilance. It does not require constant correction. It sustains itself. Sustaining systems do not demand attention, they freed it. Freed attention enables perception. Perception refines timing. Timing reduces error. Error reduction conserves resources. Resources accumulate. Accumulation strengthens position. Strength reduces the need for force. The cycle completes. This completion is not final, it is continuity without friction. Friction had masked continuity by demanding constant response. Without friction, response becomes unnecessary. Action occurs only when conditions call for it. This restraint is not hesitation, it is accuracy. Accuracy does not seek validation, it functions. What functions endure? Endurance outlasts assertion. Assertion fades when reinforcement ceases. Endurance remains without reinforcement. This difference becomes decisive over time. Time favors what does not exhaust itself. What is forced requires renewal. What aligns persists. Persistence compounds. Compound effects do not announce themselves early. They reveal themselves later. This delayed visibility often misleads judgment. Force appears effective because its effects are immediate. Alignment appears subtle because its effects accumulate. Yet accumulation governs long outcomes. The removal of force allows accumulation to proceed. Nothing is accelerated. Nothing is delayed. Sequence is restored. Restored sequence simplifies the decision. Decision no longer precedes perception. It follows it. Perception no longer competes with outcome. It informs it. This ordering resolves the conflict. Conflict had consumed energy. Resolution conserves it. Conservation enables endurance. Endurance defines success more reliably than intensity. Intensity burns brightly and fades. Endurance advances quietly and remains. The difference is not stylistic, it is structural. When force is absent, resistance has no function. Resistance dissolves. Movement becomes smooth. Smooth movement requires no explanation. It simply proceeds. This proceeding does not guarantee ease. It guarantees fit. Fit minimizes waste. Waste had demanded correction. Correction had demanded control. Control recedes when waste declines. With control receded, adaptability increases. Adaptability absorbs change. Change no longer threatens stability. Stability no longer requires defense. Defense withdraws. What remains is coherence. Coherence is not imposed, it is allowed. Allowance is not negligence, it is discernment exercised over time. Discernment recognizes when action is complete. Completion allows release. Release restores margin. Margin absorbs variation. Variation no longer disrupts. Disruption had invited force. Force is no longer invited. The cycle ends where it began, not with effort, but with restraint, not with assertion, but with recognition, not with control, but with withdrawal at the right moment. What follows does not feel triumphant, it feels settled. Settled systems endure. They require little explanation, they produce few surprises. They proceed. This proceeding is not passive, it is uninterrupted. Nothing is pushed, nothing is pulled, and nothing essential is left undone.